Information-fueled.
Opinion-driven.
This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
7:07 Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good morning to your friends. Dan Mandis here along with Joan Jones in the newsroom, KGB producing. Congressman John Rose from the 6th Congressional District is with us here. Congressman, always great to have you on. Let's talk a little bit about what is going on in Washington, D.C. right now. There is a vote to avert yet another government shutdown. That's going to happen today. Now, this is known as I'm going to air quote this, a clean bill. Talk about the details of what you're going to be voting on today.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on again, Dan. It's good to be with you. These things are always, billed as a clean CR. Obviously, it is probably never the case that it's fully a clean CR, but it is relatively clean as these things go. A few very minor adjustments in the great scheme of things. And so, the real importance here is to avoid a government shutdown and so that we can stay focused in Congress on passing the budget reconciliation that is really going to be the implementation of President Trump's agenda and get us on track toward getting our spending in Washington under control. So this is, if you will, yet again, kicking the can down the road. In this case, hopefully only a matter of 6 or 8 weeks until we pass reconciliation. And that's when you'll really see the major implementation of Trump-era policy and the real implementation of cuts and changes to spending priorities for the country that I think will get us on the right track.
It is interesting. A lot of people, Congressman, talking about Thomas Massie. This is what he has posted. The argument for CR in September 2024 was to fight in December 2024 after the election. The argument for CR in December 2024 was to fight in March 2025 after the inauguration. The argument for CR in March of 2025 is to fight in September 2025 because we're not ready yet, he asks the question. But I understand what you're saying, which is, because trust me when I say, and I've heard you say it too, just in your last answer, nobody is a fan of these continuing resolutions, but people who have looked at what the president wants to do, they're saying that there will be legit cuts when the final budget is actually comes down the pike and hopefully will be approved by the Republicans and the Democrats in the House of Representatives.
That's right. And I consider Thomas Massie a friend, but part of the reason that we keep having to do this is because there are always those who want perfect to be the enemy of good. So had, many of us had our way, we would have passed Republican priorities through the House last July. And we would have implemented a Republican-led budget for our appropriations for the 2025 fiscal year. But there were some people who didn't think we went far enough, who weren't satisfied with really good. They wouldn't take 80 or 90% of our policy objectives. They wanted 100%. So we then, because Republicans could not stick together, we had to pass the CR. And in that case, I think use Democratic votes to do it. We fast forward to December, we find ourselves in exactly the same boat. A handful of Republicans who want perfect aren't willing to settle for really good. Thankfully, 2 weeks ago, we settled for really good. Thomas wasn't along for the ride, unfortunately, but, every other Republican got on board to establish the budget resolution, which establishes the framework that makes budget reconciliation possible. We do have this unfortunate fact that the current funding runs out this week, and so we've got to do something to buy ourselves a little bit more time. And the hope is that once we pass budget reconciliation here later this spring, that we will get back on track and we'll be able, hopefully, to take on the 2026 appropriations and do so under regular order. Nothing regular about it because it seldom happens around here throughout history. I think 4 times in all of history that we, since this process has been put in place back in the 70s. And so that's the goal. I think the budget resolution that we passed and that leads to the one big beautiful bill that will contain and carry all of the president's priorities, providing funding for border enforcement, making real cuts for the first time in a long time, and extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2017, which will avert the largest tax increase in history if we are unsuccessful. So these are the president's priorities, and I think hopefully Republicans will come together this week. This is yet another, kind of way station along the way to accomplishing the bigger objective.
One of the concerns of a lot of folks is the raising of the debt ceiling. I think part of what the president is trying to do is he just needs some room to maneuver. Is that right?
That's right. So if we didn't do this at this point, then, we'd have a government shutdown that would occupy all of the attention in Washington, distract the president from his priorities, and, really stop progress, for example, at the southern border with respect to the remarkable achievements that the president has already been able to accomplish just in the first 50 days in office. And so I think we want to keep this train on the tracks and moving forward, and that's what the president has asked us to do. And after all, he's the one that the American people really gave a strong mandate to last fall.
Congressman John Rose is joining us. So, I mean, you speak to folks there within your party. Is this going to pass the House?
I think so. I mean, you never know about these things. There are always those who want to do something a little bit different, who are unhappy in some way, and we've got a lot of members who have, just pledged, I'm never voting for a continuing resolution, no matter what. And we need every Republican vote here. If the Democrats do what they're saying, they're not going to support this at all, which means they'll be voting. Democrats will be voting for a government shutdown. I hope that that's not what they do. They'll be taking the very cynical view that Republicans would be blamed for that shutdown if they do so. And so let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. I would say to our Democrat friends, they should vote for this because, as they've so articulately argued in the past, a shutdown is not good for anyone. And I really do believe that. I would never rule out the possibility for using that as leverage if it was necessary. I don't think this is a place where it serves the interests of Republicans or the president, and I certainly don't think it serves the interest of the country to shut the government down at this juncture.
Congressman John Rose is joining us on Super Talk 99.7. Congressman, I got to jump the traffic, but I'm going to ask you about tariffs straight ahead. It is 7:15 now at WTN. Time to check the roads. High of 74, sunny skies, 41 now at WTN. Congressman John Rose joining us. All right, so the president put out this statement regarding tariffs, talking about Canada. You're on the Ag Committee, I believe. So Canada, he says, is charging the USA from 250% to 390% tariffs on many of our farm products. Ontario just announced a 25% surcharge on electricity, of all things. He goes on to say a few other things. But I was really interested to know your take on and your experience in Canada charging 250 to 390% tariffs on our farm products going into Canada. Can you shed some light on that?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that we see this kind of retaliation. I think the president has articulated, I think, very clearly that, we certainly, this country in the post-World War II era has embraced free trade, but that trade needs to be fair and reciprocal. And what we see from Canada and other of our allies who are trading partners is that they are constantly protecting their critical industries, what they consider to be key industries, and their dairy industry is one that historically they have sought to protect from, U.S. products. And so that's bad for U.S. farmers. And we need them to open their markets and create a level playing field. And so it is just unfortunate that we see this. And I think the president is going to have to, be resolute in fighting to level the playing field. We heard in the State of the Union address, more broadly, the president say that in early April we will implement reciprocal tariffs. And what he's saying is whatever another country is doing to us, we're going to do to them. And that, I think, is really, at the end of the day, gets to the crux of it. We want fair trade, not just free trade. We want balanced trade. We want reciprocal trading relationships with our trading partners. And I think if we have that, that will create opportunities for American farmers and American workers more broadly.
Are you worried about, we've seen the stock market reacting. We're worried about prices getting or going higher. How concerned are you that we may end up in a recession?
I'm not particularly concerned. If you look at many of the other measures about which, we historically would look to gauge whether a recession is in the offing, their signals are not there. Obviously, anytime you have disruptions to the marketplace and the tariffs create some level of uncertainty, markets get nervous and they telegraph that through volatility in market prices. And I think that's what you're seeing happening here. But markets don't drive the fundamental economy generally, and so they are, typically just a reflection of the volatility that's happening out there. So I think as long as the fundamentals remain strong, so there's a balance of things happening here. The tariffs are going to drive up some costs, but they're also going to spur investment in the United States and reshoring of jobs that are coming back from overseas. That will create positive economic benefits here at home. And so I think that on balance, it's hard to say how this will sort itself out. I certainly don't think that those impacts are happening in real time and to the degree that the market might be reflecting this. So I would say that folks should remain calm, and those who invest in the market should, of course, for the most part, be thinking about the long-term investment. And if you follow and track markets over the long term, the U.S. stock market has been one of the greatest engines of wealth in the history of the world. And so don't get nervous and jump out unless you plan to stay out for a while. And then the trouble always is knowing when to get back in. But for most Americans, this is about the fundamental economy, and I think the president's policies will lead to a robust American economy ultimately.
Congressman, real quick, you've got this guy out of Ontario, Canada, the Premier Doug Ford, and he is threatening to shut off the electricity completely to Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. Now, I've been going over this with folks listening. Those states can get by without Canadian electricity. There's other places that they can get that electricity domestically. But I think this should be a wake-up call. We know that the grid is challenged, and I think this needs to be a wake-up call that if this guy out of Canada is escalating from tariffs to threatening to literally shut off the electricity, is this a wake-up call for Washington, D.C. to finally upgrade our grid and maybe go nuclear on some of our production?
Absolutely, it's a wake-up call. And I think we see this over and over again. We've seen the Chinese try to cut off access to rare earth minerals. I think this underscores why we need to be as self-sufficient as we can, and we can't ignore the fact that when the U.S. becomes totally dependent on a foreign country, that's not a good thing. And so with respect to electric power generation, it's really shameful that the Biden-era Green New Deal policies have been shutting down perfectly good power plants here in the United States, favoring so-called renewable energy and green alternatives. And these have made us more reliant on countries like Canada for electricity. And so, we should keep our fossil fuel plants open. And until we have replacement capacity in place, and as you correctly surmise, much of that will be third-generation nuclear in the form of small modular reactors, and Tennessee is on the cutting edge of that with the first-in-the-nation small modular reactor planned for the Clinch River site over in the Oak Ridge area in East Tennessee. We're so lucky in Tennessee because of the great leadership in recent years at TVA that we get almost 50% of our electric power from nuclear. It's clean fuel, and it's safe, and it's done reliably, and it's baseload capacity that we can count on in downtimes and uptimes alike. And so the rest of the country would be well advised to follow the lead that TVA has set in terms of how we generate electric power.
All right, Congressman John Rose, always great to have you on. Thank you for joining us. I know a very busy day in Washington, D.C. We'll talk again soon. It is 7:21, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7.